Hello and welcome to 4315. Today we are talking with Chris, the union rep for the new season's Seven Corners location. My first question for you is, when did you start at New Seasons? What was your position and how long did you work there for?
So I started at New Seasons in May of 2018. Initially, I worked in the pastry department. I was just a pastry clerk, and then I got a promotion into the operations department right before COVID hit. And so I spent the last couple of years working in that department, and then I left. Basically, the we filed our petition on a Friday, the Monday after I started at a new job.
What motivated the union efforts?
So, things have changed a lot over the years. New Seasons used to be locally owned. In 2012, Endeavor Capital bought New Seasons out, and it was kind of an equity deal, like quick turnaround, sell it to somebody else. They sold us to Shinseki Corp, which is they own Emart in South Korea, and they have like the largest department store in the world. They're massive. They're funded they benefit from the Samsung fortune. So these are folks with lots and lots of money. They bought New Seasons and 5 other West Coast grocers right at the end of 2019, and things seemed okay at first, and then COVID hit, and now that it's been 2 years, it kind of seems like Shinseki is kind of showing their hands. We're bundled in what's called Good Food Holdings. So it's the 5 grocers are in this holding company called GFH. So now that, we've kind of stabilized as a country as far as COVID goes, GFH has started really cranking up the pressure on workers. Things like our attendance policy has changed. We have task-based scheduling now, which has ruined schedules that people have had for years, and has caused people to lose shifts because they simply can't work the schedules that the bosses are demanding. So kind of all these policies have started happening that just really don't feel good and really feel connected with this change in ownership. And we felt like, if we don't have a voice, if the workers don't have a voice soon, it's going to be too late. And so there was a lot of pressure to kind of get this going. We were really inspired by what happened at Amazon. And so we started talking literally the day that Amazon won in Staten Island. We started our conversations. A few workers at New Season Market 7 Corners, and then less than 2 months later, we were filing our petition.
Okay, so here's a question. In Oregon, it's actually legal for employers to discipline you for refusing to attend an anti-union meeting. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, they don't do the anti-union meetings. They're not allowed to. They can't have mandatory attendance. They can still have them, and the fact that New Seasons doesn't have to have those kinds of meetings has not slowed down New Seasons anti-union propaganda in any way. In fact, New Seasons actually sent a mailer home to all employees at the stores that had already filed their petition, just full of anti-union BS. So just because they can't have those meetings has not slowed them down in any way. But yes, in Oregon, luckily, we are not subjected to those meetings.
What was in the flyer that they sent? What was it? Just the standard crap that they say in the anti-union meetings?
So we actually filed a ULP over the flyer because in it, basically, it's there's a lot of letters from Nancy, the CEO, but there's one particular infographic in there that shows, what you could get with a union, and it shows, the benefits you have with New Seasons now, everything from hourly pay to PTO and vacation, and then it lists everything for UFCW, and which is the union that is fighting to organize another store in the company. And so it lists everything from UFCW's previous contract with Kroger. And then for us, it just says, it basically is just a giant question mark, right? And it kind of alludes that we don't know what we're doing. Since we've never had a bargaining process, they have no idea what it could look like. The issue with that flyer is that it makes it seem like workers are choosing between UFCW or NSLU, and they're not. Workers at Aranco Station have decided to go with the UFCW. Workers at Seven Corners, Sellwood, and as of yesterday, Slabtown have decided to go with NSLU. The wording that New Seasons shows is very confusing, and also is intentionally designed to make it look like we don't know what we're doing. And so we've had to kind of push back a lot with our coworkers and be like, look, we're not going to agree to, like, we're not going to go through all this bargaining and agree to something that is worse off than what we have now, right? And like at the end of the day, like we are the ones who choose. Like we have to vote for this, and so we've been able to remind folks that like that's the whole thing with the union is we get a seat at the table. New Seasons can't screw us over any more than they already are. We wouldn't agree to that. So we've had to push back, and we've also had to do that in a hostile workplace where a lot of what we post gets torn down and replaced with their messaging.
No, it's always so amazing when employers do that too, because, it's always the same. It seems like with everybody we talk to, that employers like to argue, well, you have all of these great benefits here at this place. If this union comes in, you could lose everything. Is that kind of the narrative that they're putting forth then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also a lot of what they've been doing is comparing, things to UFCW, and we're not UFCW. We're a worker-led independent union. One of our big points that we've been talking to our coworkers is, the classic, you'll have to pay dues argument. And our whole thing is like, well, but we are NSLU. We're making this brand new union from scratch. We get to decide what dues look like. We don't have an office. We don't have a ton of staff. We're not donating to political campaigns. We don't need a lot of money to keep it going. So we could have no dues and be fine. We should have some dues to pay the lawyer. But we get to choose what that is. And that's kind of the thing is that a lot of New Seasons messaging is built on attacking an existing union. They don't really have a lot to say for us, but it's kind of funny because, this is such a unique situation where you have two different unions filing for two different stores in the same company, and one is an established union and the other is a brand new independent union. And so there's kind of the playbook we all know about, the arguments. And I actually think that No Evil Foods shared the video of, the arguments for new independent unions that was going around. And they're, the same arguments for the established unions, but just worded a little bit differently. And what's funny is we've seen both of those arguments in New Season's anti-union campaign because they're fighting, on two fronts.
Why was the NSLU formed? What's the story behind that?
Yeah. So New Seasons is no stranger to union efforts. There have been two previous ones. There was one back in 2012, and it was, kind of like a solidarity union. That actually got a really awesome win for, gender affirming healthcare. But it didn't become an official established union with the NLRB. And then the last effort in 2017 was with UFCW 555, who is currently leading the Aranco Station campaign. And that was a company-wide campaign. The big catalyst this go-around was the change of the attendance policy, which is really just designed to force workers to chew through their PTO and eliminate vacations. So when the attendance policy came out, a lot of us were pissed. The union word started going around pretty quick, but also nobody wanted a repeat of last time. And so initially, we kind of, we reached out to Workers United because they were doing the Starbucks campaign, and we thought about other unions that we could work with. Workers United is so bogged down with the Starbucks campaign that they wouldn't really have the time for us. And I'm glad that Starbucks is doing so well, or the workers there are doing so well that they're winning that fight. Even though Starbucks is giving them hell, but also we didn't want to take up any capacity from Workers United, and so it pretty quickly seemed like the best option for us was to form our own union. And we kind of got a crash course in 2 months of what that looked like, and realized it actually is a lot easier than the average worker knows. So yeah.
You had mentioned the attendance policy. Do you want to talk about that? What that is?
Yeah, so basically, New Seasons uses Kronos, which is basically a time clock company. Whole Foods uses them. They're really an insidious, shitty company. But the previous attendance policy, basically, it was a point system, and if you got 10 points, you could get fired. And points rolled over every 6 months. And then you also had a PST, which was like a sick time bank. That PST bank was not worth any value. You couldn't use those hours like PTO, but you could use those hours and then bank your PTO and not get penalized. So you could say, hey, I don't want to get paid for being sick, but I'm sick. And that would allow you to save your PTO for a vacation, right? The new policy, they got rid of PST. They bundled it all into PTO. If you are out sick, you have to use your PTO. So it makes it impossible to bank it. They also got rid of the 10 points, and they replaced it. Instead of calling them points, they're still points, but instead of calling them points, they call them occurrences, right? And so now if you have, I think it's 5 occurrences in a rolling 30-day period, you can get fired. So basically, they got rid of 10 points for 6 months and replaced it with 5 points for 30 days for a rolling 30. So, it's much easier now to run out of PTO. It's much easier now to get fired. There are countless staffers who have been disciplined for attendance who've never been in trouble before as a direct result of this policy, which came out just at the beginning of the year. And they tried to roll this policy out last summer and immediately got pushback from staff, so much so that they tabled it. And they didn't make any changes. They rolled out the same policy. And now we're seeing the results of that. And it really seems like a policy that's designed to destroy PTO banks so staff can't take vacations they want. There's rumor that New Seasons was informed that so many workers having such large PTO banks was a liability if they quit. But basically, they've designed a policy that's anti-staff. There's not really any exceptions. So, one thing that's really important to note is that 6 minutes late, that's considered an event. So if you miss the bus, and in Portland, Oregon right now, TriMet is facing severe staff shortages, and so buses run late all the time. The MAX, our light rail, runs late all the time. A lot of workers depend on those services. So if you're late, if you miss the bus, if the bus just doesn't show up, and you're 6 minutes late to work, it's the same as if a no call, no show, which is ridiculous. And so because of that, workers are getting penalized that never have gotten in trouble before and are being pushed out because of it.
First of all, I've never even heard of a company not allowing you to bank your PTO.
Yeah.
I've worked at fucking McDonald's, and even they'll let you bank up your PTO. Sorry, that's just fucking crazy to me. So it's like if you get sick, they make you take one of your paid time, they make you compensate that with PTO hours?
Or you get a point. An occurrence.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it's basically you're in trouble, disciplinary action, or use your PTO. Yeah. That is wild.
And then another thing that they used to do as well was that, which makes a lot of sense, is if you were sick, right, the first time you were sick, you would get an attendance point, but the next 2 were covered. So you could be sick for 3 days and it all counted as the same event, which makes sense. I mean, if you had PST, you didn't get the attendance point. But if you didn't, worst case scenario, you could be out of work for 3 days and it would be one single event. But now, each day that you are out counts as a single event. So, the average person, maybe if you get the 24-hour stomach bug, you're out sick for a day, but most people get sick and they're out for a few days. Or if they have kids who are sick and they have to stay home with them, then, it's not going to be a one-day thing. And now, 3 days out sick, that's 3 different events. And, your 5th one is kind of you're going to get fired. So it's really putting, people in a bind. And it's, it hurts people who are, have chronic illnesses. It hurts people who have families. It hurts people who rely on public transit. It's just anti-staff across the board.
Sorry, and when did they implement this policy?
They implemented this in January. Conversations started happening again about it. And then I think it was officially rolled out in March. 2 weeks after they rolled it out officially, we started talking about unionizing. So it shows you how angry workers were if 2 weeks after this policy is rolled out, our store's talking about unionizing. And less than 3 months from the policy rolling out, we filed a petition. The first store filed a petition. Sellwood was a couple weeks after us. So this really speaks to the anger that, the attendance policy. And then the next one is the task-based scheduling, which rolled out, I want to say in April or May. And that one, basically, they look at, what are the busiest hours, which departments need what, when, and then people are getting reassigned. So, some people who've worked Monday through Friday in produce are now being told, hey, you can't work Monday through Friday in produce. We can give you Sunday through Thursday, but they've built their lives around the schedule they've had for years. Some people have families, kids. And so there was one individual who was forced to go work in beer and wine. But then when they're not in beer and wine, the person who's replacing them is a newer employee who has to come over and get help. So now they're being forced to work in beer and wine, a department they don't want to work in, and they're still having to work in produce because the new person in produce still needs their help. And it's just kind of like, well, why not just have them in produce? And so it's a lot of that. A lot of people getting shuffled around, or people getting passed up for management because they can't do the schedules that they the company says they need to do. So people are losing out on promotions. There's a couple folks that have kids and they can't work as often because of that, which is understandable. Or they have to work a specific schedule, which is understandable, and they're not getting promoted, which is discriminatory.
This is all really confusing to me because I saw, this was in my notes, I saw an Instagram post by New Seasons that said they take care of their people because it cultivates good for generations to come. So that seems very at odds.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing, is this is something really important to bring up, is that it hasn't always been this way at New Seasons, right? And so what New Seasons is packaging and selling, like what you just described in that Instagram post, that's how New Seasons used to be. I have never worked at a grocery store where it is common to find people who've been there for 5+ years or 10+ years or 15+ years. And that's how New Seasons was, right? Like New Seasons' reputation was the quote on the marquee is the friendliest store in town. And they got that reputation by retaining people and being a place that you could work at, that you could retire at, right? And that's, unheard of for a grocery store.
Yeah.
And so they have this reputation of being a phenomenal employer, and they've just let it slip. They're still banking on it, but it's just not true anymore. And that's a big thing with the union is, we don't want to trash the bosses. We don't want to trash the company. We'll trash the bosses, but we don't want to trash the company. It used to be a great place to work for, and we know it can be again. We do these things called coffee talks, which, basically the CEO will come visit the store and talk about an issue. And there was one scheduled before we filed our petition and went public with our union campaign. And so it was scheduled before, but it happened after we'd gone public. Nancy Liebold, the CEO, she came in, and Seven Corners workers were absolutely ready for her. It was a very uncomfortable meeting for her. She tried to leave early and was not allowed to by the workers who said, "Hey, we're here on our days off. You have to stay." Right? It was not quite the Starbucks holding the manager hostage situation. I don't know if you've seen that TikTok of that.
Oh yeah, we're familiar. It's a whole other subject.
It was not quite that, but she definitely tried to leave early, and one of my coworkers said, "Hey, I got a babysitter for this. You can stay." And she did. But in that meeting, we asked about a living wage, and she laughed at the idea and said it was impossible, right?
Wow.
Mind you, they're opening up stores left and right. The executive compensation is triple digits. Nancy Liebold, the CEO, owns a ranch in Idaho, brags about flying to Mexico because they have the best tortilla chips and she can't get them anywhere in the States, right? Earlier this year, was on a, vacation tour of Asia and Africa. Just is making bank, right? And they say they can't give us a living wage, which according to the MIT calculator is $21, a little over, in Portland, Oregon, for a single person with no kids. We start at a little over 16 an hour, which is better than the minimum wage. And technically, and this is a point New Seasons likes to bring up, it's a higher starting page than Fred Meyer, which is Kroger-owned grocery store in Portland. But Fred Meyer workers bump up much faster, and a New Seasons worker in 20 years can cap out at what a Fred Meyer worker is making in 4, 5, 6 years. So the pay is just not competitive, and that's it speaks to the culture thing, and that's why that's why we want the union.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I do have a quick question for you though. You mentioned, so you said the CEO comes regularly to discuss issues or grievances?
Not regularly.
Not regularly.
No, so Nancy does a weekly newsletter that she sends out to everybody who has an email, which honestly was much more communication than the previous CEO, Forrest, ever did. But these coffee talks, it's a way for folks from store support to come into individual stores and talk about issues. Sometimes it's the CEO coming in. Sometimes it's the head of HR announcing a new policy. Sometimes it's safety concerns. So it's basically, kind of like a meeting with the bosses. We call them coffee talks, and they happen sporadically. Nancy has been the CEO for a little over a year, And so she just basically scheduled a round of coffee talks to go to all the stores. And unluckily for her, it just so happened to coincide with the announcement of our union campaign.
No, and that's great. I'm just so curious that when you guys do these coffee talks, do they break you off into smaller groups, or is it done like collectively with everybody in the store in one big meeting?
So historically, it's basically we have a conference room in our store because our store used to be the headquarters as well as a store. So we have a large second floor. Anyways, we have a conference room, and anybody that wants to go to it can go to it. The trick is that sometimes your manager, will push for you to not get off the floor because, staffing issues. So sometimes people who want to go aren't really able to go, but it's generally open for everybody. I know at ours, the room was packed. Workers were ready to just shut down everything Nancy said. At other stores, it was like 2 or 3 workers or nobody showed up. So it kind of just varies on, what the issue is and who cares about it.
Yeah, no, sorry, and I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but it's just the reason that I ask is because like that's this other like thinly veiled like union busting tactic even before like a drive is going on, that they'll break people off into smaller groups or only have certain members of staff come in so they can try to like placate those employees and define leadership, like unofficial leadership within, the employee base. And I was just curious if you thought that's what they might be doing, because that's what it sounded like to me when you initially described it.
Gotcha. No, I mean, they were scheduled before our campaign. And I think, the thing is that we were really good about being quiet. They didn't know. So, we have friends who work in store support, which is like the corporate office. And so, and there was a former assistant manager at another store who was very supportive and so we kind of got some inside information. And like the day that we were going to file, New Seasons had figured out that there was union activity happening because workers at Aranco Station, which was with the OCW, they were being very kind of public, whereas we were being very secretive, right? We weren't showing our hand. We weren't talking about it around management. And so it took several weeks for management to even figure out that there were 2 unions that filed. Even something as simple as that, they did not understand that NSLU was a separate union and was not UFCW because we were so discreet about it. And so I don't think they really had an opportunity to do any of that before we already came out strong and had petitioned. So by the time the management knew about NSLU, it was because the NLRB was calling them up and being like, hey, we just got this petition.
I love that.
Yeah.
This law firm that they hired, Ogletree, Deakins, Nash, Smoke, and Stewart, which honestly sounds like the name of a bottom shelf cheap beer. I know they have a lot of, they have a really shady past.
Not only do they have connections to Trump, they also voluntarily represented Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County.
Oh my God. I'm from Phoenix, sorry.
Yeah. So the really quick nitty gritty of this lawsuit was basically Joe Arpaio was being investigated because he spent $500,000 on a bus, and they thought that seemed fishy, and so the county wanted to know, hey, what's up with this? Instead of being like, oh, here's the receipts, he decided that he was going to file a RICO charge against the county, and Ogletree Deakins, who does not do criminal law, said, oh, sure, Joe, we'll represent you. So not only was it not representing Joe in employment law, it was also they just agreed to do it because it's a favor for a friend kind of thing. This is kind of what you'd expect from the same company that also employs a eugenist in North Carolina who represented the GOP there when they got caught up in the gerrymandering scandal, and the courts there were saying, hey, this is racist as hell. I don't know if y'all remember that, but what's it, Thomas? I forget what his last name is off the top of my head. But the point is that he's got deep ties to the Pioneer Fund, which is a eugenics organization, and he's been a partner with Ogletree since 2001 and still is, right? So they represented Joe Arpaio. They have a eugenist who is a partner with them. They represented Trump hotels in Atlantic City, and we brought it to their attention. And basically, New Season's response was, it's really hard, and we just need to have a nice lawyer to help explain the stuff to us. But the thing is that a bunch of grocery workers, right, without lawyers or with pro bono law services, have been able to figure out all of this shit to the point where when Selwood filed, because of the unique position where UFCW and NSLU are both filing to represent stores, each one of us was initially listed as an intervener in the other one's election. And it's like a 14-day window that you have to file to intervene. In order to intervene, 10% of the workers at that store have to say they want you as a union. Neither one of us has any interest in intervening. But that did not stop Nancy from telling workers at Selwood that UFCW was going to intervene in their election. And when we corrected them, they had put up signs in the break room. They refused to take them down, despite Corey Ruth, the HR manager for the senior vice president of HR, acknowledging that UFCW was not intervening, but they were going to wait until they heard from the NLRB on it. It was a holiday weekend. Both NSLU and UFCW told management, hey, like, the intervention is not happening. Like, this is false information. You need to take this down. But it came from the workers at NSLU first, right? So, like, we were able to do that, right? We were able to run circles around management, and yet they have to hire this expensive lawyer. They have a lawyer with Good Food Holdings. They have an in-house lawyer. And they haven't just hired Ogletree Deacons. They've hired another lawyer also, we saw on paperwork for Selwood. So, they're hiring all these lawyers because they can't understand the process, yet a group of workers can figure the shit out in our spare time.
So I'm so glad that you said that, because, I mean, we all know this, but that is the biggest load of shit. All of these companies, all of these CEOs that are going on this, like, terrible path of union busting, and instead of just voluntarily recognizing internal unions, they all say the same fucking thing, right? It's, oh, well, we have to, we just need to navigate this legal process. That's what they all say. They all fucking say it, the exact same thing. And it just makes me so mad hearing it coming from you too. Like, without fail, that is their excuse every single time. And it just it never stops making me angry. Sorry.
I mean, really, it comes down to they have to know how to break the law without getting caught.
Exactly.
Because if they wanted to play fair, they wouldn't need a lawyer. They could just do it with the lawyer they have in house, right? Like, we went the first 2 months we didn't have a lawyer, right? We had a lawyer who was giving us some advice. She did not represent us. We now have another lawyer who's working with us pro bono and basically is giving us advice, but her whole thing is she's like, I don't want to bankrupt you, so we're going to have this relationship. I can't actually represent you unless you pay me. But it's really agreeable to us because we get advice and it works, right? So that's kind of the level that we're working with as far as a lawyer, right? And we're able to do that and navigate this because we're not breaking the law, so we don't need a slimy lawyer to tell us how to break the law and not get caught. New Seasons has no interest in following the letter of the law, and that's seen from day one when they just trashed union literature that we put in the break room moments after we filed. When we filed that was our first ULP that we filed against New Seasons, right? So from the very start of our campaign, they have been breaking the law, and that's why they have to have a fancy lawyer so they can find out how to get away with that.
So has there been, you mentioned ULPs, has there been a lot of retaliation in terms of just since you guys have started unionizing? Has there been a lot of retaliation and ULPs that you've had to file?
We have filed several ULPs. There's not been. There have been some conversations with some workers that have felt retaliatory in nature. They haven't crossed the line into something that we file a ULP over, but it's definitely happening. There's definitely some closer conversations happening. New Seasons is really pushing to see what they can get away with. I think that the fact that we filed a ULP out of the gate, like literally the day that we gave our petition, we were figuring out how to file a ULP. And so, we filed on a Friday. By the end of the next week, they were getting a call from the NLRB. And I think that did a lot to show them, like, hey, man, like, we know our rights. Like, we're looking this shit up. You can't fuck with us. And I think that had we not come out that strong, we would be figuring out, we'd be dealing with a lot more retaliation and we'd be navigating a lot more ULPs. So, yeah, I mean, we, because of that, there haven't been too many. It's all been for the same shit, taking down union literature improperly. at other stores that have put it up. We've had to really, really fight for a space. So we have like every store has a break room, and there's like a break room wall, and it's kind of like, staff can go crazy with whatever flyers they want to put up. Whether it's, like, hey, looking for a roommate, or hey, there's a show this week. And most stores have never really enforced this weird rule that we do have in our handbook that says technically you're supposed to get approval and things are supposed to last for 14 days and that's it, right? So nobody enforces that rule. All of a sudden the union campaign happens. Now every store wants to enforce that rule, and we've had to quickly remind them, hey, you can't do that. That's changing how you're enforcing the rules. That's a ULP. We will file it. You will hear from the NLRB. Knock it off. And because of that pushback, now there are multiple stores that have an NSLU board in their break room with information from us to counter the information coming from management. Management has their own board with all of their anti-union shit. So
how's that board being received, though? I mean, do you feel like the majority of people are kind of leaning towards the union at this point, or?
I mean, it's store by store. Okay. There certainly are workers, even at Seven Corners, who are not a fan of the union. We've done a number of general meetings and like cookouts, and we've had some folks who, are on the fence or opposed come to those spaces, and they've been invited and like welcomed, and like, it's been a great opportunity to like talk to them and answer their questions. I don't know if it's swayed their opinion, but like, I think as far as the messaging, most of us read it and it's just a joke. And I think a lot of people were actually really uncomfortable with the mailers that New Season sent home. It felt like a violation. Like, hey man, like, you want to give me your propaganda while I'm clocked in, that's fine. But to send it to my house, like, that crossed the line for a lot of people as far as like, that's not cool. Even some folks who were kind of on the fence, like, just, it was a bad look for New Seasons. And when it came out, initially it got hung, the infographic got hung on the wall, and one of my coworkers took it down and, basically was ripping the store manager a new one about it. And that's how we found out, oh shit, actually this wasn't supposed to go on the wall. This is getting mailed to all of you. And so initially New Season's labor union was kind of like, how do we counter this? We got a little bit of a jump on it because, they fucked up and posted it early. And we thought about mailing something out, but, we agreed, like, that's weird. Like, we don't want to do the same thing to our coworkers that New Seasons is doing. So yeah, I think most workers see through the bullshit. And, it's just kind of like, it's a lot of mudslinging that folks aren't really into. Even if they're not a fan of the union, they don't, it's just kind of like, you can see that it's bullshit.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, particularly about these mailers, is that a lot of the times in these campaigns, the company will make this argument, well, the union organizers, they're going to show up at your house and they might talk to you and it might be unsolicited and you can just ignore them. But that's exactly, that's what they're doing here in New Seasons. They're mailing crap to people's houses.
A big thing that New Seasons has been pushing, is the whole, outside third-party narrative, right? The union is, they're a third party and they're going to be in between you and us communicating. And the thing is that NSLU is the workers, right? Like, it's made up of people's coworkers. So it's been kind of interesting as we've tried to navigate, like, what can we legally do? Because it's like, well, none of us is like, like, aside from myself, and I don't work at New Seasons anymore. Like, I'm the one listed as the union rep, but like, nobody's getting paid by the union, right? Like, we're all like, everybody at the store is a worker of New Seasons that also wants a union. So it's kind of this interesting dynamic where, like, well, no, none of us are getting paid by the union to do this shit. Like, none of us are doing this, like, as an outside agent, and there is no third party. Like, this is all people that you work with, that right? That you have conversations with. And so it's been really aggravating and also, like, hilarious that they keep trying to harp on that third party narrative when it's just like, so obviously not true.
Well, again, it's just one of those things that all of these union busting companies say. It's from the same damn playbook. Oh, the third party's going to come in, the big scary boogeyman third party. It's like, no, the union is you and your coworkers. And anybody telling you otherwise is fucking lying to you.
Like, it's literally you. Like, you just made that. It's like, this was made by us. This is ours.
Yeah. And that's like a really cool thing when, somebody brings up a concern and says, hey, like, the bosses said this, like, are we going to do that? And it's like, well, if we don't want to, we won't. And it's that simple. Like, the dues one has been a big conversation, but there's other things too. Like, and folks want to know what it's going to look like. And they're hearing New Seasons say it's going to be so bad. And they're like, they want some clarification. And it's like, it can be whatever we want it to be. right? We all have a seat at the table in creating this union. We're all going to vote on its bylaws. We're all going to, vote on the first collective bargaining agreement. Like, we get to make it, so if we don't like something, if we come to a consensus that sucks, we're just not going to do it, right? Just because some other union did something doesn't mean we have to do it. It's been like a really cool experience with this the whole time, is like, we haven't followed the rules, like, we didn't wait to get 70% of signatures before, we petitioned, and now we filed our petition less than 2 months after the first conversation, like, we are moving at a very fast pace, and it's because we're all aggravated. We're all like, we've had it up to here with, with the changes that are happening. We're making NSLU what we want it to be. And that's really cool and really empowering and really hard for new seasons to properly message against.
Yeah, and I think what's really helpful in particular about that is you don't have to rely on tactics that might not be as effective. You can come up with your own tactics. You can come up with your own strategies. And you had mentioned earlier that you were doing cookouts. And, as somebody who's been following you on Instagram, I think your Instagram marketing is fantastic. Like, the way that you're doing it on Instagram is fantastic. And I don't know, like, what else are you doing that's, in terms of the tactics, like, what's working for you,
One of the coolest things that I'm proud of is, and I can't take credit for this idea, I was listening to a podcast about a book, and I cannot remember the name of the book, but basically the premise is that a group of workers, I think they actually call themselves angry workers, in the UK, they got jobs at an Amazon factory and kind of saw like what it was like and tried different, old school organizing tactics. And one of the things that they did was, an old school like newsletter. And we thought that was a really cool idea and a really great way to just get information into people's hands. And so we came up with a workers zine. We called it the Blue Slip. So the Blue Slip is the small blue piece of paper you have to fill out to take home expired food that's going to get thrown away. It's already been tallied and inventoried and all that shit. Basically, the Blue Slip is to keep you accountable so you don't steal stuff. But it's a way for them to, it's often cited as a perk of working there, which is ironic that this place can't pay us a living wage, but can advertise a perk that we get to take expired food home. That said, they would have an absolute fucking riot if they took away Blue Slips. A lot of us depend on that to feed our families. So anyway, which again speaks to the poor pay that we're dependent on expired food to feed our families. But that said, we created the worker zine. We call it the Blue Slip, and that was the first thing that was thrown away that we filed a ULP over. But it's been really cool, right? Having like an old school like workers newsletter to give people the information, to bring it home with them, to have it at home with them, and read it on their own time. We thought about putting flyers on the break room wall, and initially we were like, man, like, how many people are going to be comfortable reading this? Like, if the bosses are right there looking at it, how long will it stay up? What if we make this zine? So I think the zine was a really, really cool idea. I think that, our social media, it's been like, we've been very in your face, very antagonistic. We know the line we can't cross legally. But that said, like, we've been able to have a lot of fun with it and, really use social media in a way that, traditional unions maybe are not. And certainly the bosses at the company are not. So I think that, like, those are the two things that I'm the most proud of. I think anybody trying to do this work, definitely, like, social media. I mean, I absolutely think that, like, labor TikTok and labor Twitter are amazing. And the fact that they're so big has been really inspiring for a lot of other workers to see that. I know, speaking for myself, like, I love that it exists, and that we're like, the workers are able to use those tools in such really cool, creative ways. And I really just think it's about getting information out in a way that coworkers can grasp onto quickly.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. I love that. And I also find it equally horrifying that they make you sign out, like they make you sign off on expired food. And it's and that food that would go in the garbage if it's not taken is considered theft if you don't sign it out. That's a thing.
So it goes to a lot of it ideally does not go to the garbage. We have gleaner programs that we work with, and they will take the stuff as well, and then it goes to like a food bank. But I mean, a lot of it does go to garbage, especially like produce. But yeah, during the last campaign, one of the people who was fired, he was fired for stealing tofu and it was expired tofu that he did not fill out a blue slip for, and because they were looking to retaliate, they fired him for theft. So yeah,
Wow.
and it's funny because, at our store, the blue slips have been stacking up, and there's not, management isn't looking at them, and when they do, it's a cursory look, so it's just a waste of time to slow the worker down to ensure that they're accountable. And I mean, really, if a worker's going to steal something, I don't think that this piece of paper is going to stop them. It just says a lot more about what they think of us than anything.
Absolutely. I just find that to be insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's expired food. Sorry, I just personal thoughts that blows my mind. But
So there's 19 stores. 3 are with the NSLU, one's with the UFCW. Where exactly, where is everything at right now? I know one of the stores had just filed to unionize. Is that right? Is that one of the 3 that you mentioned?
Yep. Yeah. So that's Slaptown. Slaptown just filed to unionize. We will be counting votes on the 7th of September for 7 Corners, and then I think it's the 8th for Selwood. So hopefully, by the end of the first week of September, NSLU is representing 2 stores. Between now and then, hopefully there's another couple stores that will be filing their petition. I know folks are working on it. So yeah, I mean, by the end of this year, there will be at least 3 stores that will hopefully be part of NSLU. Ideally, a couple more in the works, and then we go to the bargaining table sometime in the next year.
I so hope this goes the way of Starbucks for you, like the whole domino effect of, once one store unionizes, then 3 more do, and then, just consistently unionizing throughout other stores. How do you think this vote is going to go? Do you think...
I feel good. We feel good. We feel really, really good, actually. So I think it's going to go our way. I think that, there's a handful of folks who, are opposed to the union, and they're going to vote no. There's some folks who are on the fence. I think the majority is going to vote yes. And I think there's a lot of people who just maybe aren't going to vote. But we feel really good about it at 7 Corners. And then, Selwood sounds like they're doing really good. There's just a ton of support. In Slaptown, before they even filed their petition, Slaptown was putting up NSLU stickers in their break room. So they're coming out strong. One of the other stores just put up an NSLU display in their break room, and they haven't filed their petition. So, there's a lot of confidence. We're feeling really good going into this. I just think it's time. I just think that everybody knows that New Seasons is not what it used to be, and we want that old New Seasons back.
I do have one last question before the actual last question. Does New Seasons carry any products by No Evil Foods? And when you win your election, can we add it into the contract that you will get rid of it?
So, at our store, we do not carry No Evil Foods.
Okay.
Fred Meyer does. So bug UFCW and see if they will take it off. At our store, we do not. But we do carry Nabisco products, which was definitely frustrating when Nabisco workers in Portland, Oregon, were on the strike. So yeah.
All right. So as we wrap up, is there any way that our listeners can support you? Any handles that we should follow on social media?
Yeah. So at NSLU_PDX is our Instagram and our Twitter. We have a GoFundMe. That money is going to, a lot of it's going to go to the lawyer when we get there, and then just generally support the workers. We don't have a strike fund yet because we don't have any intentions of striking, but that may be something we need in the future. But yeah, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. NSLU Slaptown is Slaptown's Instagram, and then I believe it's NSLU_Selwood. But we've shared both of those stores' stuff, so follow all 3 if you want. Follow just NSLU PDX. Keep up to date on there. With any luck, September 7th we'll be having a fun party to celebrate winning.
Absolutely, and we're going to link all of that in the description so that people can head to that GoFundMe and go follow all of the handles and stay up to date on everything that's going on so we can all celebrate that victory with you. We want to thank you so much for coming on to talk to us. I think you gave a lot of good advice, and we can't wait to hear when you guys get that victory.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.